Hey everyone, this is SM Pratt, and it's time for the May 2025 Patreon exclusive final video of the month. So last video due for the month of May, then we start back up in June with the MMR. As usual, before we get into it, announcements. The consignments will go live tomorrow. I think this is the largest block I've done to date. I have everything from PSA 10 Art Academy cards, Champion Stamp Worlds promos. I think I have like waifus in both languages, bilingual. There's just things all the way from WotC all the way through. So feel free to check it out. It goes up tomorrow on the 22nd. And if you are new to the channel, just type your questions below. Actually, in the next video coming out in the MMR, just type them there and I'll respond to them in the 2 Q&As we do each month. So we'll go ahead and get started here with Monkey, who says, do you think we'll see a time in the near future where pop reports matter again? It's a common belief amongst new collectors and speculators that pop reports are no longer relevant in today's market. These people say anything under 10,000 PSA 10 is a low pop. Personally, I think that line of thinking is going to get a lot of people burned. While I accept that the threshold for low pop may be higher than 5 years ago, I don't think it's that high. I think that's a very measured take. How it used to be with modern, I would say, to answer your question in general, the pop report is still very relevant and more relevant the further you go back. I think the more established and or rare items, wherever they fall in the timeline of things, the pop report is very relevant for those. Now, a lot of people call the pop report the popularity report. So this 10,000 number could be a valuable data point for how popular Pokemon is right now. However, that's still 10,000. I think that's the thing people forget in all this mania is like, those zeros are real. Like, I know there's zero and the feeling of zero is nothing, but there's a number in front of those zeros. So it is one of those where if popularity does wax and wane for what's going on in Ultra Modern, yeah, a lot of people are going to be holding bags, who bought the peak, and that's, stating the obvious. So ultimately, I think the pop report over time will still, even with these big numbers, will still have a value for like grade disparity. Maybe there's a certain card for some reason that is a little hard to grade, and maybe there's only 7,000 PSA 10 examples instead of 10. Something like that where you can go look at the ratios. But ultimately, I think for Ultra Modern, it's take it with a massive grain of salt, like a grain of salt that could sink the Titanic. Like, it's something that is just so beyond where it's ever been before, and you just have to understand that context. But again, ultimately, I think the pop report going back, stepping outside of Ultra Modern, I think it's relevant, especially for those established cards, because there's plenty that come to mind where, I even look up, hey, what's this specific core cards, population? So it's something that I use for things like that more often than I do modern. And I don't know how it's going to change. The only thing, again, with the popularity report is it is somewhat of a barometer for, how popular things are. And I feel like I beat a dead horse with this idea. What was in style maybe 10 or 15 years ago is now cringe today. So things can wax and wane. Like your blunder years, they might come back 20 or 30 years later, but that is a possibility. I know Pokemon always proves us wrong with that. But anyway, there is some value there for the Ultra Modern with a data point on how popular things are right now. All right, next up we have the Pokeshed, who says, are Eevee Heroes and Japanese booster boxes just a good buy in general right now? Like Eevee Hero boxes selling for $400 while Evolving Skies are at $1,400. Will modern Japan ever see the surge it had a couple years ago again, or is this done? So the surge a couple years ago was because it was more like a 2020 for them. It was a similar situation where you had this new demand on previous supply. I don't know how you replicate that because I feel like it was more conditional than anything else. And they've done a good job of satiating that demand. They print to a point now. With that said, though, my Rocket stuff is getting crazy allocated. Like crazy. I don't know if there's a whole thing I can go down the MMR. I can dig into the weeds with that, and maybe I will. But my distributor is going to go in person and daddy up and try to figure out what's going on. But outside of that, I've been able to buy a lot of this stuff much more consistently than I was, in that brief time in 2023. Anyway, as for Eevee Heroes, I've sold literally a couple boxes in the past 2 days at 500 a piece. Is it undervalued? I've sold them for more in the past. I don't know where this ties in this idea of popularity. Popularity is not like the pop report where it is this exact thing. Even while we say it's the popularity report, it's not really an exact science. So trying to figure out, what's going on with Eevee Heroes compared to Evolving Skies, I think the only thing you're left with is just the popularity disparity between languages. English is typically more popular for this set stuff, and I think that's just the general answer where you have to land. But ultimately, it's one of those that I just buy, hold. It's at my pace too. I don't need to be running a mile a minute. I'm the slow and steady, enjoying the view, enjoying the breeze. So that works for me. But I know for some people buying these Japanese boxes and they aren't moving much, if at all. Some of these Scarlet Violet boxes just sitting there like turtles. Like they're just waiting for them. Like, give me anything, Blast. So he's like, give me one little, I'm not even asking for a hydro pump, just like a little scratch. So it's tough. I know for people who want things to move faster, especially now in our light speed market that we're in, this is one of those old school vibes where I just buy, hold, and to me it's such a low cost risk. That's really my focus with Japanese stuff, and I can't really speak to if it's underrated because again the print responded to 2023, so I think they might be in danger, as we tease about Snorlax falling asleep on the printer, of potentially oversupplying the market where they reacted to that. And now that's done. It's like, okay, 2023 is over. We got a new bubble that we're trying to figure out right now, okay? Like, get that out of here. Like, again, that's the blunder years. Like, we're done with the 2023, so we're trying to figure out what's going on today, and maybe that recent situation with Rocket is the canary in the coal mine. Maybe there's something going on. I'm not sure. The market's moving so fast now, but nonetheless, Japanese boxes aren't. They're pretty chill. They don't really have these high swings. Like I think a lot of the questions in the last round were about Fusion Strike or one of the boxes that shot up like $300. You're not seeing that as much in Japanese, and it's because there is more supply, and also it's always been more slow and steady forever, regardless of 2023, regardless of whatever's going on now. Anytime, just point at any time, ever. Like, feel free, wherever you feel most comfortable, just go there. Set the time machine to that date, and it's been true. So yeah, ultimately, I think it's a value buy. I think that's where I am with it. That's how I see it. That's how I treat it. I just treat this stuff as a value buy. And until it stops appreciating, if that were to happen, or if some of these boxes were to pull Pokemon Go, yeah, never mind that I have like 10 plus cases of those just sitting in storage. But if everything went the route of Pokemon Go, like if Pokemon went nowhere, Pokemon going nowhere, then yeah, I would be more trepidatious. I wouldn't buy as much. But so far, it's producing just at a slower, less sexy rate. But yeah, Eevee Heroes and Evolving Skies, I think that's just speaks more to the popularity difference in English and like the culture that I think the stock trading, finance, whatever you want to call it, I feel like that's so much more developed in the US as well than anywhere else right now. So I think that's another factor in there with all that stuff. But there you go. There's the rant on Japanese boxes. All right, next up we have Timmy, who says, "Hey Scott, I love how passionate you are on the May MMR and all the dad jokes and analogies you had. Every time I try to temper myself, it just comes out. Like I don't believe in free will for myself. It just flies. What is the utility of quantifying value via data versus using your own gut or taste in determining the value of modern sealed? I automated quantifying a value metric by taking the price of the entire set and dividing that number by the price of the ETB or the booster box. For example, a set that's $1,000 and the ETB is 100 will give you a metric of 10. Oh, okay. The larger number, the greater value. All the Scarlet Violet sets have had a value between 3 to 15, aside from Prismatic at 60. I feel the big limitation that needs to be considered when interpreting this data is probably at reprints. My time horizon is ways 3 years, but theoretically I can hold for as long as I want, no debt, etc. Since my experience is in vintage singles, I would appreciate a stream of conscious on determining value in modern plays. One more question I could sneak in. Would you advise on primarily sticking to the good sets like 151 Prismatic while still buying a little bit of all sets? Thanks. Okay, so it's almost serendipitous how all three of these questions were in order, because it's just a continuation of, first off, the idea of popularity. So when you're asking about doing a modern player or making any moves in modern, that's what you're dealing with. We started talking about how the pop reports have numbers we've never seen before. And that's just where we are today. Like, it's a missing no glitch. Like, it just zeros everywhere. There's so many people doing this, and what you're betting on is popularity. And you can make money with that. Like, my casual purchase, just because I wanted the card, and even just ignoring the noise, which there's probably something in there about ignoring the noise and staying focused. I bought like 10 or 15 of the Van Gogh Pikachus very casually. Like when they did the redemption thing, I think on Pokemon Center, I just bought as many as I remembered to. I didn't even do it like, let's lock in and, hashtag entrepreneur. I just was like, okay, I've remembered to do this, I'll buy them. Those things skyrocketed. Based on what? Like, the pop report, it's going to be the most graded card, if not already. Obviously it's very popular, but still, that's something that no one can ever predict. So when you're asking about gut and quantifying data and all that. The market just operates so much differently today that I don't know if these systems really matter. I see what you're doing there with the numbers. I think that's a good, like a pop report. It's a good thing to look at and consider. It's a tool, I guess, or just some baseline. But ultimately, you can't. But the problem with older, rare, mint, or better today in this market is that when you're trying to translate that to modern, it doesn't apply because none of this stuff is there. Like, they're not old, they're not rare, and everything is mint. So the condition part doesn't matter. So it's like all that is not really relevant for what's going on in ultra modern right now, where that still applies to a lot of the old stuff. Those inherent barriers are still there. Outside of the Akabane printer, it's hard to go and find these rare cards, especially mint condition. That's always been true. Again, go set your time machine to end. Get with Trunks. Go at any point in time from 1996 till whenever. They've always been tough. There's never been a time, and if they were, it was very brief, when certain cards were released. So getting back into this idea of trying to play around with modern, you're playing with popularity. That's what you're doing. So I don't know how much of these, even my rubric or my ideas or my analysis of the market, I don't know how valuable that is in the face of pure popularity. I really don't know what it's going to do. So I can't really advise on how to say, what I can tell you is historically, some of the sets that I bought that didn't have any indicator blowing up, like Team Up is a perfect example. People were not freaking out about Team Up like they were, 4 years ago or 5 years ago like they are now. Same with Legendary Collection. If you were buying, when I got into Pokemon again, Legendary Collection was that and Base 2 were everywhere. They were everywhere. You could buy EX stuff blisters for $20. I know it stings. And you could buy Legendary Collection all day. But if you would have held it for 10 more years, all of a sudden people started thinking it was cool. This is what I mean about popularity. There's so many tales of popularity that wax and wane, and that's what you got to understand when you're getting into it. I think these models, whatever you want to call them, like your formulas or anything that will help you, even my little catchphrase, older, rare, mint, or better, that definitely applies to the more established things that aren't here anymore. And it's like what you said, the risk is this stuff can be printed again. There's a lot lower risk. Like when I look at my first edition base card, I'm like, okay, they don't have that card stock anymore. I doubt they're using a lot of the things that they use, in the way they are today, how now they print. I know for a fact that English has different card stock today than Japanese. So there's so much more barrier to trying to one-to-one all that old stuff, where this new stuff is just a matter of, do they want to do it? Do they want to keep doing another round of 151 or whatever it is? Now, to the idea of buying all the sets, that's what I was trying to say when I said think about Team Up, but I just ranted another direction. I bought a variety of everything back in the day. Everything. Crimson Invasion, you name it. The poopers and the hoopers. I bought all of them. And some of those poopers did better. Like I remember Primal Clash was $75 a box on like a Black Friday sale because they just wanted to move inventory and it just wasn't good. And look at it now. Steam Siege is another one. Steam Siege was dragged for how long? Look at Steam Siege now. I'm just really trying to throw it at you that you're getting into popularity here. I would say, I don't like advising on exactly what to do, but it's better if I just say what I probably do is that I do probably go a little harder on the more popular stuff and a little softer on the less popular stuff, but I still have, I think, every single set in Japanese and most of them in English. So do what you want with that. But ultimately, again, I'm trying to really explain how this market is so focused on popularity right now that, even these sets like Steam Siege and whether it's Primal Clash or whatever, that were not only ignored but dragged. Like Steam Siege was a constant meme for years. It was like Crimson Invasion was just so bad that it was hard to like make a joke about it. It's like that Key and Peele episode where the guy has like the thing on his neck and the comedian's roasting the crowd. He's like, do me. And he wants him to roast him. Great comedy. And that's what Crimson Invasion is. It's like, how do you make fun of a set that's just it's so bad? Steam Siege was dragged forever. A lot of these sets weren't that sexy. They didn't perform well. And then all of a sudden, kind of like Legendary Collection, it just had its glow up, So again, I can't overstate how popularity is the name of the game for Ultra Modern. And I like your equation here. I think there's something there. But just like the Pop Report, it's a good ruler. It's not, I don't know if ruler is even the best example. It's just a good baseline. There's no magical formula that's like, boom, there it is. Maybe until AI or super intelligence comes through and they're like, buy this now, sell this now, that'll be a whole new world. But as it stands, again, even with my own stuff, the AP ratio, older, rare, mint, or better, how I analyze the market, a lot of that just doesn't really matter for ultra modern because it's just pure popularity. Because none of those things apply. It's not old, it's not rare, and pretty much everything's mint. So none of that matters. It's not there, and people are still paying $1,000 for some of this stuff. So yeah, that's where we are. And again, the thing with Steam Siege and all that, drag forever. Now it's the bell of the ball. There's no one can predict this stuff. You can't. That's the beauty of it all, is you can't know. Even the most seasoned, no life Mewtwo dwellers, like, there's still stuff that's just like, what? Like, anyway, there's a long ramble. You asked for ramble, you got it. Hopefully that question was answered somewhere in there. Paul K says, hey Scott, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you mentioned that you were basically buying Japanese sealed boxes only for your sealed investing and no English. This is due to the fact that you got distributor pricing and also you commit with your distributor. Yeah, that's mostly true. I still buy English, but definitely a lot more Japanese. In a hypothetical scenario, we no longer have distributor pricing, you do not have commitments to buy. Do you think you'd be buying Japanese sealed at the current market where English seems unstoppable? 2 examples I can give: Heat Wave Arena 58 box and Terrestrial Festival at 77. They both came down a lot in price since release and are giving up the opportunity of 151. Oh, giving off the vibe 151 after all the reprints. Staying on Japanese, there are few older Japanese boxes with Japanese market prices 10 to 20% more than the US, cheaper to buy in the US open market than sourced from Japan. Do you recall seeing a trend like that in the past where demand is higher than the rest of the world? I wonder if it'll stay that way or eventually the US prices come down to match Japan. Thanks for all you do. Yeah, I think right now we're in a weird spot where with tariffs and all these other complications, a lot of this is going to balance itself out, but lately you have been seeing better prices directly. I don't know how that works. I don't know how these people are set up, but it's just the beauty of competition, I guess, because there's so many people who will sell a box for $1 just because they like doing it. That's just it. I know people like that, like, whatever. As long as I can do thousands of them, I don't care. Like, I know people who just, they want to move a box for $1 or $5, and if they can stack that quantity, that's their name. That's what they like to do. I've done calls with guys who do just as much in revenue as I do, totally different sides of the spectrum. I'm more margin. They're just an absolute Gatling gun, like just constantly firing volume. So anyway, I'm not sure. I think there's something there with that. These people over here that are producing that, are bringing that lower. But ultimately, whenever you're asking about what I would do without a distributor, yeah, I'd still be buying it. It goes back to the previous points, how I just see it as a value purchase. I'm someone who doesn't mind slow and steady. In fact, I prefer it. Selling these Eevee Heroes boxes at $500 a piece is a much better comfort zone for me. I would rather do slow and steady. I don't want to be doing packages for hours a day. I'd rather just a little bit at a time, And I am getting to a weird luxury problem where maybe one day I have too much volume and I'll have to figure out something, either sweat it out again, hire somebody, someone buys me out at some discount. I don't know. But the bottom line is that I just see it as a value purchase. It's always worked for me. I just declined a $1,500 offer on one of my Wild Blaze boxes I probably still have 40 of that I bought for $40 a piece. And not everything's going to be Wild Blaze, and Wild Blaze isn't even CP6, and CP6 isn't even Pokekune. Everything has its number, its identity, and you could even say era or whatever. But the bottom line is, until this stops, I'm just going to keep doing it. And sure, numbers are different. Tariffs change the game a little bit. So far, I've just been continuing to keep on as I have. And yeah, other than that, I don't really know what isn't already a repeat from earlier where it's purely a value purchase. And I do agree that some of these boxes feel like 151. I know there are reprints. I haven't been getting a lot of my orders. I don't know if that's because they sniffed out that I'm a dirty foreigner. I don't know what it is, but my distributor's going to go in and once I hear back from, I'll give you the tea on what's going on there. But ultimately, I know this stuff is flowing through, and it's just at a level that, like earlier we talked about 2023, they're not only reactive to that time. I think this is just their new norm. Like, they're going to print this way for a while. Like, I missed one of the sets, for example, the first order of it, and I'm like, it's not a big deal. I'll catch it on the second one. Like, I haven't had that feeling in years. I was so used to, like, oh God, I didn't get the order in and now I'm screwed, where I'm like, whatever, I'll get on the second one. So there is more supply for Japanese product, where English, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why this isn't, they just don't care. That's really it. They don't prioritize it, and or it takes a lot longer than we realize to logistically, like, produce another facility. Maybe that's what it is. The rendering to do something like that, they're still figuring out all the N64 polygons on how to build a new print facility. But I really think that's the core there, is that supply is greater in Japan. Supply flows more now. It flows, as we see with these prices, when you're talking about how the Japanese price is 10 to 20% more than US. And there is something to that. Product flowing here is in a way that I've never experienced it like that. Like going back, especially 5 years, it was so hard to get volume. Like, I know everybody here in Patreon wanted me to do Rudy's model, and I did too. I wish I could do that. I would guarantee to hire someone to do that, where it's like, yeah, screw it. If you want to order whatever you want, we'll line it up. But I don't know how it's working. There's got to be some connection with someone who's Japanese, and they're able to, they have a contact here. And I don't know. We're evolving, I guess, as a business, and before those barriers were there, now they just aren't. But anyway, I don't really know exactly what to make of the difference in prices. I see it more in singles. I see plenty of singles that are worth more in Japan because of only buying from Japanese and not those dirty foreigners. So it might be a similar vibe. I'm not sure, but I do think there's something going on with the supply chain that I've never experienced before, where it flows in a way that's just, yeah, back in the day you couldn't do it. Now you can. All right, next up, Bob Bueller says, I know you love to talk about scalping, so long term, do you think the scalpers are going to go away? Also, rank the top 5 live streaming platforms. You got Whatnot, TikTok Shop, eBay Live, Fanatics Live, Dropship Live, Twitch. I've never been on any of these. Also, what is your favorite card from the old Made deck? Also, what makes the best surprise set you'll spin on Whatnot, Kraken? I don't know what any of this is. Also, who's your favorite Whatnot streamer? I couldn't name a Whatnot streamer. I don't watch any Pokemon content at all, or card content at this point. Is Max Mofo on there? Maybe him. I want him to be on there, so we'll just say that. I don't know about any of this stuff. I don't have time to do any live. The only live thing I do is watch hockey. That's it. That's the only live thing I got going on. By the way, I'm burning up in here. It's like Cinnabar Island, so apologies if we get a little toasty. All right. E-Tango says, hey, Scott, 2 questions for this round. What do you think is preventing TPC from printing more cards to satisfy current demand? Is it due to the complexity of logistics? It's crazy how these just flow in the conversation. Of the factories and distribution centers, or is it leadership is not aware they're not aware, otherwise they wouldn't have created Pokemon Pocket? Is it we are not feeling the effects yet? And also, in the most recent MMR, you mentioned you're slowly transitioning from trading cards into stocks and classical investing. What prompted this move, and was always part of your plan? Do you have an exit plan for stocks? You find yourself to like picking stock companies and more sticking to indexes, ETFs, and if it's just indexes, why not just picking stocks? All right. So for first question there, I think it's what we touched on a bit. The logistics have to be more complicated than we realize. It's not like Fortnite where you can just auto build or whatever. We just like, boom, there's a printing facility. I just don't understand how they can't use. Back in the 90s, what they would do is use other printing facilities. And that's why you didn't have certain sport card sets in the 90s, is because Pokemon was hogging the printers. I've loved that data point, that bit of history there, because that is what you need today. We're almost in that same. If we had to compare what's going on today, it feels most similar to that 90s boom, and that's what they did back then. So it's got to be something there. I remember with Shining Fates, there was like a 10-month-ish delay, give or take, when you really started to see that heavier supply come through. I don't know if that just made more noise. It was easier to signal this one set was making people lose their minds. I don't know. We're always on the outside looking at it. We're always trying to figure it out. But those are the pieces of history there that might help. Now, for the transition from cards to stocks, it's something that I've given a little more attention to. The problem I have with stocks is you can't, oddly enough, and maybe it's just because I have so much more knowledge in Pokemon and collectibles, I feel like I can't rely on stocks as much unless you do like super conservative. Like, for example, I have like a lot of money in SGov, because the treasury yield is doing well right now, so that thing pays out pretty well. So it's all about volume trading too. You need volume for any of this stuff to matter. That's really what it is. The stock, here's my essenprism for the stock market. You're collecting crumbs to make bread. That's how I feel. You're just trying to collect enough crumbs so you can have some bread at the end of the day, and there's probably some dad joke of bread and money, but that's it. Like, that's what it feels like. So it's just different. Like, I know when I'm doing more in collectibles. I feel more comfortable with it. It's not like I'm just going to do a either or. When I'm saying I'm transitioning, what I mean by that is I'm transitioning in the sense of slowing down or lightening responsibility, because, like, you know, not doing public videos, my mental health's through the roof. You know, that was killing me. The pressure of it all, you know, negative comments, just the noise. It's also Pokemon, why I said earlier so quickly, I don't watch Pokemon card content, because it's just bad. Like, most of it is just low quality. It's not about even discussing ideas anymore. You know, I don't know what you're almost like a lighthouse in the fog, you know, like a Dragonite's trying to find. Like, it's just tough. Like, that's more of what I meant by that, is that I'm trying to lessen responsibility, and I'll always still have some type of income, you know, through collectibles or Pokemon, but that was really the focus there, is it trying to just enjoy life a little bit more, and in doing so, it's building up, you know, a portfolio that you can live off of. That's really the name of the game. Just having, again, volume trading. That's what stocks are. It's just volume trading. Like, there's some stocks, you know, I'm not saying don't put money in. I'm not a financial advisor, obviously. None of this is financial advice. It's just someone sweating in front of a camera who has been doing collectibles for 20 years primarily. But I think that's the name of the game for most people doing this. It's like a retirement. And retirement is really just, again, a game of volume. It's like, how much do you have? You know, I see those posts of people who are like, hey, my mom's 70 years old. She has like 100K in her 401k, and like, can she retire? And they're like, no. It's like, retirement is not just a age thing. It's, again, that volume. Like, you need to make sure you have enough runway to just chill. So that's the idea there, is just to slowly transition some of my responsibility and work and sweating it out all day into things like stocks are more passive. But there's always going to be some Pokemon thing going on. And if anything, it's something I'm very conservative by nature. You know, even me mentioning SGov, that's a very conservative holding. That's where I like to be. I come more from a wealth preservation perspective than I do, very similar to Pokemon, value perspective, wealth preservation, you know, when it comes to stocks. There's plenty of things like Nvidia or whatever shooting up or down, whatever it is, Tesla, that just feels like it never ends. You know, the Mag 7 or whatever they call them. There's plenty of things out there that'll make you more money. But again, that's why these markets are so interesting, because we're all here participating in it with different complexions. All right, next up we have Cousin Vinny, who says, random question. Do you have, or the first of questions, do you have the N64 Clay Fighter Sculptor cut, and can you pull off the shelf? Please believe. Please believe. It's right here too. So these, we'll do a little demonstration. These, I don't even know if you can see all this on camera, but the upper shelf here is the rare stuff. This is the Clay Fighter Sculptor cuts. I think where is the regular Clay Fighter? They're in alphabetical order. There we go. So this is I don't know how this is on camera. 63 and third over here. This one with the big zoomed in Gigantamax snowman. That's the rare one. And I think it's still the most valuable cartridge. Maybe he'll go here next. There we go. Living together. I think that's still the most valuable, like, standard cartridge, because when you get into not for resale, I think the one I have the most, I'm probably the most proud of or excited of, is the demo cart next to Majora's Mask. Like, those are the two grails. Not Instagram grails, like, legitimately the most difficult things to find. But yeah, the Clay Fighter Sculptor's cut, it was a Blockbuster rental only. So that's why it's so scarce. It's just cool. And also, I played it as a kid. I remember my neighbor, who's the only child, got all the systems on release, and we played 63 and a third, and then he got Sculptor's Cut as well. So it's just cool having that time. But yeah, definitely, you name every cartridge is back there now. So moving along to your actual question, favorite N64 shooter. Everyone says GoldenEye, probably because Odd Job, and wondering which ones you like. Also, I thought of an actual question. It seems to me that Pokemon and Nintendo are focusing on TCG instead of focusing on the games. While we're seeing great quality variety, albeit limited availability in the cards, the video games seem uninspired and safe. What are your thoughts? Is it money? Is it tracking with the other media entertainment trends right now? Made this out of your wheelhouse. Yeah, I think it's tough with the games. I see this debated for years now. We've gone through this iteration so many times on E4 alone. And even in real life with actual humans when we dare talk about Pokemon. But basically, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it is where Nintendo's coming from with all that. I agree that Breath of the Wild exists in Nintendo, why can't you even just skin Breath of the Wild into Pokemon? Like, it's something that I feel like is right. It's in the same room. They live together. It's all there, but somehow they're not connecting. You know, I don't understand why it doesn't go to that level. Maybe, again, just being naive and it's too much fan dreaming. But ultimately, I think why Pokemon just doesn't change anything is because it's hand over fist money every time. You know, what's the indicator for them as a business? You look at it, you're like, oh, okay, I guess that game's doing well. You know, that's how they're seeing it. They don't know. I'm sure a lot of these executives can even name like 20 Pokemon. Like I saw the GTA executive, Rockstar, whoever the company is, and he's like, yeah, I'm not a gamer. I don't play this stuff. You know, he's just a CEO. He's trying to make this company the most money or whatever. So I'm sure it's similar there. But yeah, I don't know what would make them. We're also trying to figure out how do we make them aware they need to print more product. You know, I agree that there's a lot more variety in trading cards. There's a lot more innovation to give them credit. There's a lot more risk taking, I guess, to get this variety of artists that you have now in each set. I feel like 151's like 151 artists. Like there's so many new artists in there. So yeah, there's more chances taken with trading cards and video games. You know, I think again, they just see zoomed out. Okay, we're making a ton of money. I guess we'll just keep doing the same old thing. You know, I that's got to be what it is. But yeah, favorite N64 shooter, it's got to be GoldenEye Perfect Dark. I don't think anyone can answer anything differently. I mean, Perfect Dark took it to another level, but GoldenEye for the just earlier before I sat down, the pause music, like why is it that good? Like, anyway, yeah, Rare was on fire in the N64 era. All right, next up we have Lucky Same Collectibles. Says, hey Scott, what are the benefits of going to card shows and expos these days when the industry is so optimized? You can pretty much find everything online. Exactly, that's what I've been saying forever. Somewhat of a subjective question. Some people may enjoy going them, but buying things in person, and that alone is a good reason to go for many. Aside from that, though, the ability to deal directly without a middleman fee can reduce friction to market deals happen, but there's also the cost seller buyers have to pay to be there. Everyone just takes out their phone and determines what they pay or sell, all based on the online market price, so which is kind of funny. The buyer ends up paying market price, and even the seller saves an extra 10% on fees. It's not like they're saving a lot, factoring their travel costs and the price for a table, unless they're doing 5-figure deals or something. I know I'm kind of answering my question and ranting. I'm just trying to prod you to see any other angle that I missed or challenge my limited observation. Yeah, it's challenging mine as well, because I think the first thing, I'm joking about. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. I'm more reclusive, keep to myself, but other people are more extroverted. They want to go, they want to just do something. And I think that's what this hits is, here's the thing we can do. I don't really know what's going to be there. Let's go check it out, energy. Let's go check it out. Oh, there's this expo over here. Let's go check it out. Are you going to this? There's so many things now. It's something that was needed for a long time. A lot of people would meet up at Worlds or they meet up at some event where now it's like you have that, or it'll be, hey, any of you guys over here in, Tennessee, we'll give Tennessee some love. Or you guys over here in the Atlanta Collecticon, whatever it is, Chicago one, pick your poison. And it'll be a way for people that are close to meet up. There's a lot of angles there. And I think if you're someone who is new and trying to do this, you got to remember, I think a lot of people just like doing it. I think a lot of people just enjoy the feeling of trading something that they like. I think that's really it. It's really that simple. I remember back in the day, that quote I said about there's just people who like selling boxes for $1 profit. They just like it. That's it. It has to be that. Because I remember back then it was like you're making maybe $1 to $10 a box. Maybe. And so you have to just enjoy it. And I think that's what the biggest morsel there where all this stuff stems from is, people like it. There's a lot of risk factors. There's a lot of competition now. But the interesting thing I thought about this when I was running the other day, and I was like, I got to remember to say it in a video, is that what's nice about Pokemon and the collectibles market is you're not really competing like you would, let's say, if you're McDonald's versus whoever their competitor is now. It used to be Burger King, but I feel like Burger King's kind of one of the fallen houses in Game of Thrones or something. They're just like, you don't really hear about them as much. But anyway, I think that's what's nice about collectibles is that you're not necessarily competing in that sense. Like, you can just not do entire parts of the market. Like, I don't have to deal with Ultra Modern at all if I don't want to. Even within Vintage, you can just carve out a little corner and just do that. And you could even do it in a way that really doesn't have to be going to the show, or it doesn't have to be whatever it is. You could really just chase whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever your intuition is telling you. I've said this forever. There's so many people, even back in the ancient era, who were doing niche promos or whatever thing it was, and that's where they stayed. Everybody has their lane. And again, it's not like just because we're all doing these cards, you don't have to really compete in that sense. Now, there is some element of competition always, but again, the beauty of it is the cards are the value. Like, those are the assets traded. So it's more like the stock market than it is like, companies competing, if that makes sense. It's more about what are you buying and trading, and how does play a factor to an extent. It's not as sterile as the stock market. Stock market is pure just trade, that's it. Where there is more of a how element going on with collectibles. And I think at the end of the day, though, that stock market aspect is very strong. It's a big component. So this isn't a need by any means. You don't need to do any of this stuff. And you really don't need to do pretty much anything you don't want, as long as you're working hard towards this goal that you're good at or whatever, your niche. As long as you're going forward in some direction, you don't have to do I don't have to worry about the daily fluctuations of mod. I don't have to care at all about it, at all. Like I said earlier, I don't have to watch any content. I don't have to do any of this stuff. But again, that's what works for me, because I've been doing this 20 years. It's different. But again, that's more the point. You don't have to be doing every single thing that someone's doing at these events, and vice versa. They don't got to be listening to me yap or buying these big cards. Some of these people, again, might just like selling stuff for $5 a piece, and as long as they can keep their supply chains flowing, that's their prerogative. I'm just trying to paint the picture here that there's so many players in the game. We got bug catchers, we got lasses, you name it. A lot more lasses now than we used to. There's a lot of trainers out there. There's a lot of just a massive market today. This idea of gambling too comes into it. There's so much going on, and again, the more identities that come in, the less of those things you have to do. That's really it. You do have to adapt to the overall trends, the big macro things happening. But yeah, I don't have to do what Lass is doing or the old fisherman. I don't have to live that same tempo or do those same things. So that's the beauty of it. And arguing against myself, like that, these people, they enjoy doing that. They're more extrovert than me. They probably have more of a need than I do. If this were 10, 15 years ago, maybe I would be more inclined to do something like that. I used to go to events, but it's just never really been my thing. I've never been that type of store to begin with. I'm more the collector investor model, where again, if you're more this actual business, buying product, flying through singles, I get it. This plugs in better. So anyway, I feel like I'm just in rambling mode now, but takeaway is there's a lot of trainers, and I'm definitely in the Mu2K, but there's people out there, on Route 5 or something, Route 30, who are just like walking around looking for a trainer to talk to, looking for a battle. And yeah, that's what this stuff's for. All right, Rob Stark says, hey, SM Pratt, what do you think of the new Japanese Meowth promo 192 SVP? Is that the one, it's like watercolor, and you can see, I think it's just the one. It has like, it looks like the old Kanto buildings in the background. It's like Meowth on a limb or whatever, doing like a Prada pose or something. Gives me similar vibes and nostalgia to Korean Ditto, and even ties back to the old games. That's the one. Have you actually picked any of those up? Do you think it'll come out in English and journey together? And it doesn't look like it's in Destined Rivals or New Black and White. Thanks, really do. And your breath of fresh air from the insane Pokemon testing YouTube channel. That's what I mean, man. When I'm saying the thing about Pokemon card content, that's what I mean. I miss the days of like just loving the cards. Even when I am now, it's like the passion just like controls me. Where now the passion is just like yelling and like talking about modern trends are, to me, it's so boring. It's like, it's not even that insightful. Anyway, to your actual question, I think the thing that's my only hesitation with the Meowth is I'm just waiting to make sure it doesn't get a reprint, because we might have a rare Japanese promo that also looks good. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't it come with like, isn't there like a Wooper in there or something? Is it from a pack? I can't remember. For some reason, I'm pairing that with, there's like a Wooper, the Pooper, the brown one, that Wooper, that version. I think that's similar, or it's released around the same time. Anyway, yeah, my only pause on it is if it'll remain exclusive. If it does, I do think it's a good card. I think it just looks good no matter what. But yeah, if it gets an English release, it's just, I don't know why. The Japanese exclusive with good art, it just does something. It feels good. So yeah, I know the exact card you're talking about. Meowth's like leaning, kind of a watercolor style with the Kanto Game Boy looking buildings in the background. Yeah, I think it's good. Only hesitation is I'm not sure if it's going to be reprinted in English, and I'd have to do like a deeper dive than, responding off the cuff. But Yeah, there's something with that pooper card that I think is related. I don't know if they came out at the same time. I don't know why I'm associating those two, but that also, the pooper one does look good, but the mouth looks better. All right, next up we have JD says, afternoon, Scott. Long time since I asked a question. Glad, always love it. Always love when the lurkers come out. Was wondering if you had any idea what the Vending Series Pops looks like. Have been noticing the rise in a few cards from Vending Series sheets, in particular Uyama's Pikachu. Side note, I paid $45 back in 2020, and it got 10. Good for you, man. Good, love to see it. Love to see it. I just had a guy the other day message me. He was like, "Hey, I heard you love Vending," and I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I got a complete set of sheets." I'm like, "Yeah, so do I." And I could tell he wanted to sell, so I was like, "Just curious, what are you offering him at?" It was like $1,500 for a set, and I'm like, I remember buying those things like $150 to $200 a piece. So yeah, love to see it. Anyway, they're now going for more than $1,600, which is why I was wondering if you had any idea or information about the number of sheets potentially to be out there. PSA and Pop is currently 15, 16. Thanks again. There's never going to be a real number. I think all you can do with the Pop report kind of goes back to the first question. It's a baseline. I think in the case of something like this, it's more valuable. It's so old. All I can tell you is I've been buying Vending for a long time. So when I would buy collections from Japan, my hierarchy would be big promos. So like, let's say if there's happens to be a prize card in there, Masaki's, Not Awake, Koros, things like that, and Vending. I would always pull out all those cards, and then the rest would be holos and, you know, set stuff. So I've been doing that forever, literally forever. So with that said, I will say Vending has a good amount of supply out there. I don't think it's something that's going to disappear overnight, 5 years, even 10 years. I do think, however, as you mentioned, from 2020, the price point average will increase. I think Vending has extreme staying power, but it is not that rare. And moreover, there are still plenty of sheets. You know, even when I mentioned the thing about buying complete sets, I don't know how many sets I have. Let's just say 10 of each. I don't know if that's more or less somewhere in there. And, you know, that I don't know how many other positions are like that. I do know some people who have a lot more than that. But yeah, I don't know when they're going to hit the market. When am I going to hit the market? Can I even find those sheets? You know, that's just it. But the bottom line is, throughout time, Vending has been more available. But I do think it's something that has lasting power because it was so ahead of every artist in there was just like, I don't know what happened. It's like the dream team of a set. It's like all this beautiful art of such a variety of artists, especially back then, because, you know, base set, why I love it, has like 3 artists or, you know, a handful of artists. Where this is like everybody showed up. I don't know what it was. Like they were in the zone. It was like the dream team. So anyway, that's the breakdown on it. I do see more attention on Uyama's Pikachu lately. I've consigned more of those. I've taken notice of it more. I would definitely say it's trending. I don't know if it's going to carry the whole set. I think it's a card that stands out on its own, which I'm just saying the obvious here. Anyway, the number of sheets to potentially be out there, there's no way to know, like, hey, there's 100,000 of them. You got to remember, these were put in vending machines, literally. It was the old school version of what you got now, where scalpers are lined up to hit the touchscreen. Like, this was it. Like, you had to crank it and get the little thing to roll out or however it worked. So yeah, that's what it was. So it was all over Japan. So again, decent supply. It's been that way. The caveat is I don't know how many sets are deeply in storage out there. Moreover, I think the price, regardless of that, the price average is going to continue to either hold or move if we're talking sheets. Now, singles are another game. Those can have ebbs and flows. The PSA 10s can go around. You know, let's just pull out a random PSA 10 vending card that's not Uyama's Pikachu or like a Mewtwo or something. It can hover in the low hundreds or, you know, bounce. Below that, it can really, really move around. So that's, again, this indicator that there is a decent amount of supply. It's always been that way. And let's just say it always stays that way. I still think your average cost is going to continue to hold and or go up as you've already seen. But yeah, that's the best we can do. Unfortunately, there's not many cards that have like, hey, this is how many are out there. I think Masaki's had estimated numbers in the like tens of thousands. And again, this is just what you're told. I remember back in the day when that stuff would come out, I remember someone who had a store in Japan during the 90s. He's like, yeah, this is what they say, but we don't know if that's what it is. So always with a grain of salt. And again, there's only a handful of cards that really have like declared releases. But yeah, if Masaki's saying, if that's in the tens of thousands, I think that's at least a conservative baseline. You know, that's what we got. So anyway, hopefully that answered. Can't say enough about vending, but understanding that it doesn't hit the rare. It doesn't qualify as rare. Some of it's hard to grade. I have some of those sheets. I'm like, should I peel them? Should I do the Yama? But you pull it off, and that centering is just like, no. That's the thing that's so annoying. Like, you can't control the centering. Like, centering is game over. Like, you can check whitening or whatever. The second you peel it off and that border is thin, it's over. Anyway, glad to see you out of Lurker Shadows. All right, next up we have eTango. It says, hey, Scott, is just me or more people these days attributing a collection, like how much is in their stock market or 401k? I know the apps like Collector are getting more popular, but it seems a bit wild that some folks out there are really tying their net worth and wealth into the hobby. Does it get dangerous at some point, or would you look at more like crypto? Yeah, I think collectibles, unfortunately, are not like stocks in the sense that you can go look up like what's the PE ratio or what's this quarter's earnings. Like, I guess you can say the value, and there's something there at the pop report and everything, but the risk element is that we're all trading on demand. That's what we're doing. When I say older, rare, binge, or better, the most zoomed out before even that is that we're trading on demand. And in that demand, you have things like trends, or popularity, whatever you want to say. You have things like rarity. You have things like condition. You have things to work with. But yeah, I do think it is dangerous if you're seeing it. Like, when people say portfolio or collectibles, it always gives me a little bit of even as someone who has like made a livelihood out of it, or it's made a livelihood out of me. Like, that's really what it is. Because at the end of the day, like, I never use that word for my cards. I understand the value immensely. I'm very highly aware and attuned to what's going on almost all the time. But yeah, I just hesitate to use that word because I just don't see it that way. I see it as something fun that has value, a hobby that has value, that also has monetary value. That's how I see it. That's usually what I try to recommend, because it's a dangerous game when the problem is when you look at charts, okay? When you look at all these price charts, is you forget that it's a piece of cardboard with a cartoon on it. You forget that. I can look at a chart of, just pick your poison, Apple, Google, the Mag 7 again, just choose anything. The S-Cub that I mentioned. You can really dig deep into these and understand the holdings or whatever it is, the company and everything that's going on. At the end of the day, there's both on that same chart. It's like, oh, here's the little line of what's going on. I think there's what I'm trying to highlight is there's a disconnect on, like, everyone who's doing it is like, oh yeah, I know it's just cardboard, whatever. But I don't think people really do know that the depths of risk that are there, especially with this modern stuff that's being traded purely on popularity. Again, I could be dead wrong, and everyone's going to make money, and the line just keeps going up, right? Because that's how it works, isn't it? Like, it always goes up for everything. So yeah, I think that is the risk there. Even some of the vintage cards, some of these people are going to hold this stuff for a long time, and maybe it never goes up because, again, this shouldn't be treated in that same vein. And the other thing is, maybe to argue against myself, is there's plenty of stocks that are garbage. Like, there's plenty of stocks that don't do well. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of like boomer stocks right now that had their heyday and they're done, and they just whatever, ripple along for the rest of time. So yeah, I mean, there's a similarity in that sense, but still, at least some of those stocks, like let's just say Wendy's or whatever, something like that, not to pick on Wendy's, not a sexy stock, but it's still going to pay you a dividend, and there's just more going on there. There's more depth to it, I think, is the answer. Where with especially the modern stuff, when you get it, there's something I can't let go of. Again, just being honest here about these old cards they're like made men. When I see a magazine or an ad or whatever it is, yeah, I'm reading magazines, and I'll see like a Magic the Gathering Alpha deck, or let's say Arabian Nights card, whatever it is, pick your poison. I'm like, man, it's like locked in. It's just immediately, it gives you that history, We're like, what's this new stuff doing in that sense? Like, what's its aura? Outside of the current value and how much money it could potentially make you, it doesn't have that aura to it. I don't know if that makes sense to people watching, but that's the feeling I have with that older stuff. And forget about Pokemon. Just throw that bias away. Like when I look at like any sports card or, you know, those old video games like a Super Mario Brothers 3 or something, or, you know, N64, whatever it is, it just has something there that I think is has a little bit more staying power. Where these newer cards, again, this is the difference in price charts. Like everybody's got a price chart, but there's more to it. What is that product and that thing you're trading? So anyway, I'm just I need to come up for some air, but yeah, I do think it is dangerous. But we could be proven wrong. You know, Van Gogh Pikachu said, okay, like doubt me. Like Van Gogh Pikachu said, doubt my little plain gray hat. Like, I don't care. Like, so you never know. That's what's so great about markets, is that there's plenty of people in here right now watching. And when I've said, you know, crypto's a little too much for me because I'm more conservative, and they're balling out of control. You know, more power to them. That's, again, the beauty of all this stuff is it takes a village. And with that said, yeah, I do think inherently there's more risk. And I think most people, even who are doing it, I'm sure a lot of people are doing it. They're like, yeah, I know. I'm trading pictures of fictional dragons. Last point here, I promise. The thing with Pokemon that's tough is like, you can look up like a Martin Luther King autographed item, and a fictional lizard breathing fire is worth more than that. You know, it's just crazy. And so yeah, there's a lot. This is a great question actually, because I just go on and on and on this one. But anyway, overall, TLDR, I do think it's risky to treat it as one thing. 401k is a lot different, more complex, more depth, more inertia, more staying power. That thing I was trying to say with all the old cards, that's more there for the overall like established indexes, whatever you want to say. There's just more staying power, inertia, market cap, participation, all that in there. So, but then again, great Van Gogh Pikachu's like, doubt me, keep doubting me. All right, Bob the Builder's back again with a longer question this time. Which country is your favorite to tariff? Oh my god. Maybe I was gonna say Japan for all the like difficulty being, I don't know what it is with them foreigners. Like they're just so, and no, they get away with it so well. By the way, they're so polite. They're so polite in how racist they are. So yeah, maybe them if I had to choose, even though it's like a love-hate relationship, because I have a lot of friends there. I say that out of people I know have businesses there, and they are unknowingly fluent in Japanese, and one of them is non-white, and pretty much every business he goes into, they just start one immediate racial slur after another, and then he switches over to Japanese and they give him free stuff. So yeah, that, if I had to choose, it's that, but I'm not trying to get into therapy here. That's just the only thing I can think of. Just wanted to try to answer one Bob the Builder question. Also, what's your favorite set to scalp? I wish Alberta would become the 51st state to make easier money. This is the biggest consumer by far. Oh yeah, you're in Alberta, aren't you? Because you're Edmonton. Are the Oilers winning the Stanley Cup? It's good to me. It's going to be Florida and Dallas. That would be a nice final. Sorry for Edmonton. Edmonton's just high octane, all offense. But I do want Connor McDavid to get it at some point. Moving along. Negative buzzwords of Pokemon. You got Scalper, Junk Slab, Resealed, CT Scan, Fake Scammer, above market price. Also thoughts on MJ Holdings' new Walmart mysterious mystery boxes. $22 for a loose pack. CTC Slab seems a lot cheaper than other mystery boxes. Is it better than the Omega ones? I don't like to really... So why I don't like to talk about this stuff is I don't want to give any of these places any free advertisement because I don't do anything with them. And I'm not even trying to throw shade. I don't know any of these things. Like, literally zero. I don't know what... You might as well just start telling me something about, I don't even know, like Final Fantasy lore, which I did play Final Fantasy, so not even that. That's not obscure enough. Like, Roblox, whatever kids are doing now. Like, I have no idea. So yeah, if PSA is Amazon, then CGC is a Temu version of PSA. That one's actually pretty good. Yeah, I like that. That actually makes sense. That feels right. But yeah, for the other stuff, not my wheelhouse, and I don't know which set. I've never scalped a set. I've also, we're at a point now where scalping, it used to be just like scalping is so overused. It's like if you resell product, you're scalping. You know, I saw someone talk about someone scalped some item, some card from like 5 years ago. I'm like, how? Like, it's 5 years old. Like, anyway, tried to make something normal out of that. All right, next up we have Jimmer who says, "Hey Scott, I recently started selling on eBay and wondered if you had any advice for someone starting with selling aspect of their page. I've got 30-ish sales and $10 to $40 cards, and I wanted to build up my selling feedback before selling high-end cards. I also want to keep it as low stress as possible. Obviously, I want to make the purchasers happy, but I'm not interested in flipping 100 cards a day. So any recommendations to slowly grow and would be greatly appreciated. Also a chance to meet up with PFM. Oh, that's cool. A couple weeks ago, and he was nice enough to bring some super cool cards for me to see. It made me want to hone in on some of my more unique collecting goals, and it was a really great time. The Power V4. I was wondering if recently you've met or talked with anyone that's inspired a new collecting goal of yours. Maybe it's not even Pokemon related. Thanks for your time, and can't wait for the Leafs Blues final next year. Man, dude, sometimes when I'm like upset about the Blues, you know, then I see what happens to the Leafs, and I'm like, that's pain. That's just a lot of pain. I feel bad for the Leafs. I think they're in a pressure cooker. I feel like if you had that team in a place that was more chill, less media, even on NHL.com, like, I remember the day of the game, it's like, if the Leafs don't win game 6, is it like the end of whatever? It's like this super serious. It's like, you wouldn't be saying that if it was like Columbus Blue Jackets. It would just be like game 6 tonight at 7, you know? So yeah, I feel bad for that. You know, it's so much pressure that those guys are under. I feel bad for Mitch Marner too. Like, seeing that clip of him when he's a kid, and he's like, "What's your favorite team?" He's like, "Toronto Maple Leafs," and he's like getting booed when he's touching the puck. Like, I just don't like that. Yeah, I feel bad. Toronto, it's just such a pressure cooker there. Anyway, as for your actual question, so you can build up slowly, and this kind of ties in the thing about how you don't need to do everything that's going on in the market. You could get comfortable doing something and just keep doing it well, you know, put energy into that. You know, Steve Vai, rare Steve Vai quote here, he's a guitarist. Everyone would always say, you know, do the things you're not good at. And he's like, no, I just did the thing I was really good at and just did it immensely. So there is something to that. You know, you can be someone who, if you're trying to sell bigger items on eBay, I think as long as you get above like a certain threshold, let's just say 100 feedback, I don't know, draw a line wherever you feel comfortable. eBay authenticity is going to take over. You know, people, the second, if you're talking items over 250, once you get across that line, it's just, that's it. And what I see on my end, maybe I'm speaking out of my, I was going to say privilege, but earned inertia from doing this for so long on my store, is that I think the clear photos is a key thing. You know, if you have a clear photo, clear scan, I try to make mine as like clear as possible. I know people used to joke about the SM Pratt tilt. They're kind of tilted, but ultimately I think that does help as well. These are we're like tweaking, you know, we're just very, very subtle things. It's like just rearranging snowflakes on the top of the mountain. It's not something where it's like, oh, do this one thing. Whatever. eBay sellers hate this truth, you know. It's just, that's it. You know, you can maybe do some nice photos. Once you get to a certain point, eBay authenticity is going to take over, you know, with that threshold, so I wouldn't worry that much. But yeah, I never thought in these terms. I think once you get like 100 feedback under your belt, just do what you're comfortable with. That's the focus. Rinse and repeat. That's what I did. Of course, you adapt within that to a degree. My adaptation is more about what's going on in the market. Should I sell this card that I only have one of, that's worth a couple $100, or sell these over here that are worth the same that I have 10 of? That's more what I mean about adapting, and, you know, seeing what's trending right now and trying to take a guess on, do I think this has staying power? That's more where the adaptation lies. But you shouldn't really have to force yourself to be like, hey, I'm going to stream, I'm going to network, I'm going to go to these events, I'm going to do whatever. I've been down most of those roads, and I know people who probably make more than me who we can't even name. You know, they give me cards to sell. They're just anonymous people enjoying their lives. So just trying to really show you that there isn't a binary here. The suggestion I can give again is, yeah, once you get to a certain point where you feel comfortable, I think eBay authenticity will give those buyers that like confidence, and clear photos. That's it. Concise description. I remember I would have like a paragraph in there. I'm like, hey, nobody got time for that anymore. We're on 30-second videos now. Like, you know, people just want to, if you can't do it within this motion, if I can't read it this fast, like, it's got to be edited. So yeah, concise description, clear photos. And yeah, once you get that eBay authenticity, I don't know how much feedback matters. Price. One other thought maybe is, the lower you are, the newer you are, you probably have to undercut a bit more. That was always the thing I told people when there were these guys who were really aggressive back in the day, and they're like, yeah, screw these big sellers. We're going to undercut. I'm like, guys, the big sellers are the ones that you want to have the higher price. You know, you don't want the guys with all the money and all the cards being down here, because it cuts out all the room for the new players. So that's my advice, I guess, is when I was starting out, I found myself undercutting more than I do today. I still undercut on certain things, or are more competitive on certain items. And again, that goes back to where the adaptation has value. Adaptation and understanding the market, not feeling like you need to adapt and do every single thing all the time. So yeah, I think those are the recommendations. Nice you met up with PFM though. That's pretty cool. And also we have back-to-back Canadians there. 2 different worlds though. 2 different types, 2 different places in Canada. All right, last few questions. We have Tango who says, in its vending series, PS10 is underrated. Seems like selling for $50, $65, and it takes about 20-ish to grade, and then shipping back to you. You're not guaranteed a 10. She's cost around the same amount. Am I missing something? Cheers. Ties into, I think it was JD who asked about vending earlier. For some reason, singles have more fluctuation, probably higher availability. You know, there's probably less sheets at this point of these cards and more singles out there ready to mingle. And that's really it. It's just a quantity game. And as mentioned for JD's question, you have that ebb and flow, and it's been like that for a while, almost exactly what you quoted. You know, that 50 to maybe a couple $100 range. You name the card, I've seen it do it. You name it. Whether it's a Pidgey or Red Tata, Butterfree. Is Butterfree in there? Caterpie's in there. I know Caterpie. He's in there for sure. All those, even the little Pokemon, I've seen the range. Even those little trainers. You know, one that I've noticed is come up a bit is the one machine, the Akabane printer one. You know, it's like the card machine, the black and white. Probably because it looks unique, Uyama style. But yeah, anyway, you could get into the weeds. Certain cards are better than others, but ultimately that's why it is the way it is. If anything, Etango, you gave a great example of what I mean about that idea of adaptation. When you analyze those numbers as a business, it really wouldn't make sense to fire through this inventory at $60 a piece, $50 a piece, when it costs $20 a grade, and most likely you're not going to get a Gem Mint copy, you know, out there in the wild. So that's the perfect example, what I mean about that idea of adaptation. That's what I'm always doing as a business, is analyzing my inventory and figuring out, okay, is it time to sell this one? You know, the buy, hold, sell perspective. And yeah, that's definitely a hold for me right now, because it just doesn't make any sense. I also love those cards. That's my biggest issue, by the way. My bias of like, I just love these cards. I don't want to sell it. That's the hardest thing to get past, even if it goes up. But yeah, that's couldn't be any more of a timely example of maybe it is undervalued as a graded buy option, because the AP ratio is just nuts. You're basically, if you can get them for $50, you're basically buying a one trial ticket. You know, if you had to go through once with PSA, you're done. If it didn't get 10, you're done. You know, you might as well just bought it bird in the hand. So yeah, definitely there's a value there for sure. But again, I can't overstate how it's had this flow. It's been in this range for a long time. That's really it. Throughout different markets and different conditions. All right, Paul K says, hashtag T double dip. Hey, Scott, I want to throw a short question here, and feel free to go as long as you want. You often ask if your rambling is too much, but I personally appreciate when you go in depth. Well, I'm glad that you do. I hope all the other like hundreds of people do too. What price do you check regularly these days, and what are your go-to prices to check to get a feel on the current market, sealed, singles, graded, etc.? Thanks. Actually, that's a pretty good question, because I don't go and say, okay, I'm going to go just break down, you know, the sealed market right now. Usually what I do is on a need-to-know basis of, I'm going to consign this card, I'm going to auction this card, I found this item in storage, something that comes across my, you know, my view, and I'm like, all right, what is this? You know, I'm going to look it up. So that happens pretty frequently, but there's not really a category that I'm doing on its own. I would say right now, because I get such a variety in consignments, that's probably the biggest thing I'm doing, is price checking that stuff. Because I have to know, you know, for certain fees, I try to give a fee for the value. And that's usually my biggest, most searched reason. But yeah, it's everything, you know. And again, it's more than need to know. If I'm curious, like the other day I had downtime, I had like a dental appointment, and I had like 15 minutes to kill, and I was like, let me just look up these things real quick. I can't remember what it was. Oh, the boxes, my Japanese boxes. I'm like, let me just go through and look these all up, just so I can check all the prices right now on every set I can think of. Because sometimes I just don't have the time to like look through these things without it, again, being in need of like, hey, this came across my desk, let me look it up. That's usually what it is, like 90% plus % of the time. Otherwise, if I have time to kill, I'm like, all right, let me look up these boxes and let me look up something that just comes to mind. But even that, it's just whatever pops into my head, and that's it. But yeah, I will say also, I don't typically price check that often. It's usually one of the other things I find myself doing right now is I'll sell an item, and especially if I sell too quickly, like back to back, I'll do some research and like, okay, this probably is underpriced or something. What's going on? You know, even the Wild Blaze box I mentioned earlier, that's something that I recently increased the price on because, you know, it was just it was actually way too low because the next one was like 1,000 over. So yeah, it's stuff like that where I'm like, why am I getting so much interest on this all of a sudden? And usually it's underpriced or whatever. And for the people who see it, like if you buy it, it's yours. But there's times, like I had a guy one day who bought an Evolutions box from me. I think at the time, last one sold for like 900 or 1,000. He bought one at 800. And then so I sold it, you know, shipped it to him, whatever. And I put up another one at like 1,000 with an offer, and he was complaining that he couldn't get it again at $800. I'm like, what? So anyway, that's that. A lot of that stuff. And that kind of ties in a lot of these other topics about the haggling, dealing. I think people like that, like the negotiating and all that stuff. You know, maybe that's why those venues are popular. But anyway, that's that's usually what it is. It's just need to know, comes across my desk, and you know that's why I look it up. All right, last couple questions we have. My name is Blaine, who says, thoughts between upgrading my Mew Celebrity Championship arena from 6 to 9 or picking up a Mysterious Pearl in a 9. The goal is eventually to do both, but I'm trying not to go overboard with my purchases. Curious about the general opinion on both. I think both those are actually not, I always don't want to say underrated, but they are not super, super hot right now. I feel like Championship Arena is just one that you got to really know your stuff. Pearl as well, maybe ever so slightly more. A little sparklier, I guess. Those are definitely not their record prices. That's the best way to say it. I remember when the Pearl was doing crazy numbers. I remember 10s were like 5 figures. Maybe even 15K at one point. I've never seen a Pearl somewhere in there that was doing crazy numbers. But anyway, both of those are at a more reasonable rate. The 6 to 9 jump's tough because I'm sure there's plenty of 9s out there that have a miss, you know, they just missed the indent on it. That's one of those cards that pretty much always has an indent, like a Masaki Mark type thing. Very similar release. The corners, you know, a little pamphlet, just like Masaki cards. So yeah, that one, I don't know, because the 9 out there might just be a 6 upside down. You know, that there might be some 9s out there that they probably got that same indent that yours does, but you know, they're dressed differently. But anyway, both of those to me right now just do not feel like hugely optimized cards. If anything, they're probably still down from the record prices. So if anything, I probably didn't help you at all. I guess I would say, since you already have the arena, I feel like the Pearl might make more sense because you already have the arena and it's more of an upgrade than going from nothing. But yeah, I'm just trying to, again, spend way too much time on it. But anyway, both of them, definitely not the record prices. And I feel like they're those where I have both, actually, and I'm holding both because I just don't feel like it makes sense to sell them. So I don't know if that helps either. All right, last but not least, we have Trico, who says, hey, Scott, when markets are very hot, how do you determine what cards to buy over others? I bought a lot during the 2023 pullback, but looking for opportunities seems much harder when the price of everything shoots up. If there's a product with good fundamentals, but everyone's talking about it and the price is high, i.e. Van Gogh promos, how do you assess how much to buy versus hope mania cools down? Other cards that aren't as talked about, like good options, I know you mentioned Korean Ditto, and over time can also appreciate, but those opportunities seem rare when everyone's making so much Pokemon content nowadays. Curious to your thoughts. Hope the question wasn't too long-winded. Thanks. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good closer because today, this idea that I keep kicking around about how you don't have to do everything all the time. You don't have to buy a single Van Gogh Pikachu. You'll be fine. If I didn't sell Van Gogh Pikachu, what do I care? You know, you don't have to do all the things that people are talking about. Now, I do think there is something to, like, you know, that Korean Ditto you mentioned. Not a very rare card, not extremely rare, but it is exclusive. So it has something going on. It also just looks good. I think that's the key thing today. If I had to point to some type of like definable idea within the popularity, it's that it looks good. Like, I think everyone agrees Van Gogh Pikachu is a good looking card, right? Flashy or whatever. It doesn't even have to be that flashy. He's got a gray hat on. He's very humble. He's on a humble kick. But the whole point is that these are cards that have like immediate, that thing I was talking about in other videos, that immediacy, directness, it's just right there. I feel like that Ditto card has it immediately. It's like, oh yeah, that's a cool card. That's the second I saw it, when I actually saw it on Yahoo Japan, I'm like, whoa, I'm like, what's this guy? And I looked at it and it was like Korean exclusive, and I just went down the rabbit hole. So I don't think there's, again, one answer that's going to be, what should you buy? You know, that can, the eternal question can be answered. It really comes down to what you want to do. And I think understanding that certain cards like Van Gogh Pikachu are highly optimized, maybe they'll continue to go up, who knows? That's the risk you run with that stuff. I think the difference is with something like Ditto, the risk is more, will it transform? You know, will it become more valuable? Is it going to be at this price range for a while? You know, it already had a bit of a decay for the raw copies, and is that what it's going to continue to do? You know, where's that going to be? This is stuff you had to worry about back in the day. Ponchos did that for a long time, came out hot, chilled for a long time. Now they're super popular. You know, I mean, they were always there doing something, but they would do that type of thing. You know, that was always the thing. Short-term flip, long-term dip. That's how it used to be. So you see that, the Ditto, maybe that's a healthy sign. I'm not sure. But the bottom line is that you're ultimately trying to figure out, are you going to come into, in those examples, are you going to come into a more optimized card that's already selling at its sell price, or something like Ditto that still feels very cheap? I feel like everybody watching can afford that card. Even if my cat sitting self was watching, I could afford that card. So that's really it. And there's no formula until AI gets there. There's nothing that's going to say buy this, sell this right now. And then when that happens, people are going to do that. So I don't know what that's going to take us to. You know, we're going to have to go back to intuition. So ultimately, what I do in these moments is the Ditto one that feels pretty safe to me. Might not make me a ton of money. That's fine. I think the thing I really want to emphasize is that all of this is risk. It's all risk. And I don't think that's said enough. You know, a lot of the themes we're talking about here is people treating it like a 401k, pop reports over 10,000. Like, there's a ton of opportunity, but risk is opportunity's shadow. And I think that really needs to be said here, because like that's what I'm reminded of in these boom markets, is that I am entering and putting in more capital, putting in more money, also absorbing more risk doing that, hoping that I'm going to be able to replenish it. And I think a good story here is that in 2020, I had guys, the boomers that came in 2020, these guys, they negotiate like they're on QVC. Like, this guy came to me, beautiful mint collection, Charizard first edition, hologram. And it was like an actual first edition base set, looked gradable. I won $60,000. I'm like, I bet you do. I bet you won 60 grand for it. It's like, what? Or no, 70 grand. And I was like, that's like at its sell price graded. And by the time if I would have bought that, graded it, sold it, the market already deflated. So my point is, this idea about risk, all the indicators, all the price charts, everything was telling you, oh, there's a little bit of money to be made there, especially if you can haggle through those boomer tactics and get down to a more reasonable price. You know, I can make some money, right? But that's the point, is that that's how I look at it, is while this market is going up, it's harder to go back in, because that's what we're dealing with at the end of the day, are non-productive assets. You know, this is something that differs from stocks where there's no production happening. Even the company themselves not printing enough of them. You know, production's not a thing right now in modern Pokemon. There's not enough of it. And when you sell these items, you have to go back in. And there's plenty of examples where you could short the market. You know, speaking of 2020, if I would have sold through all my first edition base stuff, I could have bought it back for maybe half the price. And 6 months later, a year later, sure, you could have done that. But again, all of this is risk. It's not easy. It never was and never will be. All of it's risk. Because those are huge moves to be made. It's like, do we want to throw like life-changing money around that could potentially go to zero or significantly lower? You know, so anyway, I'm trying to say all this because when you asked, you know, what do I do in these markets? That's my focus, is that I know the market, if it's selling well, that means I have to buy well. And I have to figure out if I want to buy, you know, these cards again at these prices. Typically, I'm more trepidatious and I wait. That idea that I have is I would rather wait those 6 months and feel more confident that this market has more staying power than go right back in. Like that example I gave, I had so many offers during 2020 to buy collections, especially WotC stuff, that today would have just been an absolute bloodbath. That would have been a brutal, and it was, you know what was even crazier? That I think was right before PSA closed the doors. So like if you'd have bought that collection, you'd have been screwed. I mean, yeah, you could have got the holos through, but it's like you need all that value, to get your money back out of it. And that's when they were like, sorry, we're not letting you grade cards right now because of the craziness. So my point is, out of all this, is that when these markets go up like this, I usually see it as, okay, well, now if things are selling well, I have to buy well. I have to really put more money out there, and it just gives me more pause. But, things like the Korean Ditto, or, I talk about Japanese boxes, these to me, I classify as value purchases. I could be dead wrong. They could not make much money. They couldn't, maybe Ditto doesn't transform into, he transforms into another Ditto or a Pidgey or something, maybe it'll transform into Charizard, who knows, or Umbreon. But that's what you're up against. You're buying something, and your risk opportunity there is, will it evolve? Will it transform into more value? Where something like Van Gogh Pikachu is already so high, it's almost the opposite, where it's like, will it continue to go? And maybe it will. But yeah, it's not just those two cards. I'm just trying to give, you mentioned those, and the ultimate perspective I have is that thing of when things are up, I just, you have to pay more, and I find myself in that position a lot. Like, I probably paid a ton during 2020 for stuff that I never would have imagined, buying those cards at those prices. Like, I remember buying first edition base stuff. To give you an example, the stuff I bought from Gary, I bought like at $3 a piece. Or not, no, what was it? 17? Yeah, like $2 to $3 a piece is what I paid for all those cards. These are like mint, mostly near mint to mint and some gem mint. First edition base stuff, $3 a piece. So, yeah, that's the difference. And then once 2020 came, like, all right, we're going to add a 0. Okay, hold on, we're going to add another 0. And so, that's it. It's like you got to really, that can be, I think, a lot of whiplash for people. And it's ultimately, again, I know it sounds like a generic, but this is so risky. I know I love it. It's a passion. It's out of passion, but it can't be overstated, and it's probably not stated enough that it's, while the market's doing well, your buys are going to, you just have to buy at new prices. And again, it could be, I don't think we're in a 2020 where it's just going to go like this for especially WotC stuff. I don't think that's going to happen, but there's probably some cards that are going to do a Zoro dive there off, when he does the, like, it's going to be one of those. It'll be a Tears of the Kingdom swan dive. So there will be some. I just don't think anyone can predict the when, the how and when, the factors to it. That's why, last thing I promised, on E4, when we talk about this bubble or whatever's going on, I asked people, I'm like, can we talk about what we think is making it happen and what we think will make it stop? Because that's what I'm curious to see. Because, like, whenever it's a .com bubble, or let's say the housing bubble, there's this picture painted of, here's our guess, and here's, why we think it's a bubble. Well, right now, it's like, yeah, we know there's more demand from Pocket, but it's so widespread. And what's going to satiate that? What's going to change that? How we combat this? Where if you go to 2020, that was more circumstantial. That was more because of the circumstances that put people inside, and they started looking online. And once those circumstances changed, the market did as well. So it's just different. I don't know really how to pin this one down. Feels more similar to 99, which 99, a lot of people said was a bubble, but I said tongue-in-cheek in that same thread, I'm still waiting for that 1999 Time magazine bubble to pop. Give me all those bubble prices. I'll pay $500 for a PS10 birthday Pikachu. Let me have it. Like, so that's the thing that's tough, is that Pokemon's a crazy market. And that's why, again, I said the thing about risk, because back then that was the risky move. But if you held that birthday Pikachu, it's now worth more, which is insane. It's insane. This is why markets are so crazy. You can go on, we can talk forever about it, and we still won't know everything. But anyway, hopefully that addresses it. Again, I'm just more risk averse. I think that's the right phrase, where when things go up, your buy price goes up. And there's certain cards where, yeah, like the WotC stuff I was buying, and then I hit a point with that guy who came to me at 70K. I'm like, it's too rich. Can't do that one. I'm going to chill. Thank God I did. But that's the name of the game. It's just, I get a little more trepidatious out of experience. And again, this one, I don't think it's like 2020 where we're going to do a Tears of the Kingdom dive. I just don't know what'll change that. Not that it can't happen. It could always happen. It could always be worse. It could always go lower. But yeah, I just don't know what that is. Always curious to hear what people think could do it. But anyway, that's what I got. I hope I answered your question. I feel like I just go on and on. So anyway, guys, I really appreciate it. Always look forward to these. I didn't know if I was going to do it today or yesterday. I'm glad I waited, because I think I got another question in today. But as always, feel free to ask me anything on your mind. I was a shy guy in school, so I completely understand if you want to lurk. But I try to encourage all the lurkers to come out. And I love talking about all these ideas. It's really engaging. It is like a ton of fun for me. This is the most fun I have engaging with Pokemon right now, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Like, outside of the practical monetary aspect, it just gives me a lot of passion, meaning, etc. Keeps the flame going. So thanks for keeping the Charmander tail lit. And if you want to consign anything, message me. The block will go live tomorrow. If you want to, there's a ton of stuff in it, like a ton. So next month we'll have plenty of space, and this will be a good time if you want to get anything in. That's pretty much it. You know, deal them out. I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Till next time.